for this fourth clinical case discussion, which we are having today online. Today's case is going to be presented by Dr. Siddhant Lalwani from Bharati Vidyapeeth Medical College. The faculty for today's case presentation are Dr. Sanjay Joshi will be joining shortly, Dr. Ashish Bavdekar sir, Dr. Sumit Pitkar sir, and Dr. Rajendra Karambekar sir. We also have notable senior pediatricians amongst us. Dr. Agar Khedkar sir has also joined. So I request Dr. Agar Khedkar sir to also interact if required. Dr. Mankar is coordinating the case presentation from the Bharati Vidyapeeth side. And only request is this is a meeting platform. So I request all of you to keep your mics shut, switched off. That is, mic should be muted unless you are speaking, so that there is no background noise. Is that okay? So now I think we can begin the case presentation. I request Siddhant to take over.
Sure, sure. Before starting the presentation, am I audible to everyone and can everyone see the slides?
Not yet slides, you're audible. You'll have to share.
I've already shared the slides. I'll just try once.
No, I think you need to share again.
Okay, one. Let's try.
I can see the slides
the slides are seen. Yes, they are visible.
They are not in the
visible.
slideshow. Now it is slideshow.
Okay.
Yeah, they are visible.
So should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, one and all. So I would be presenting my case today on behalf of Bharati Hospital, Pune. So starting with the case, the informant in my case is the mother of the child, who's a reliable source. We have a 3.5-month-old infant, baby Nitya, first and only issue of a non-consanguineous marriage, who was brought by a mother with complaints of right-sided cheek swelling for last 7 days, yellowish discoloration of the eyes and mucous membrane for last 7 days. The mother also complained of the child passing light yellow colored stools for the past 5 days. And the mother also says the child had blue patches all over the body for the last 3 days. So I would like to throw upon some light on my presenting complaints and slightly elaborate my complaints in brief. So I've just added some pictures in order that it would be visible for everyone and appreciate what I'm trying to talk about here. So starting with the history of presenting illness, Nitya was apparently all right 7 days ago when her mother noticed a small swelling over her right cheek while she was bathing the child. The swelling was initially small, roughly the size of a pea, which gradually progressed to attain the size of a lemon in 3 days. And ever since, the size of the swelling has remained the same. It has not progressed further to that. You can all visualize and appreciate the swelling on the right side with the picture which is displaying on the right side of the screen. According to the mother, the swelling was firm to touch but was never painful, and the child never winced on pressing the swelling. On the same day as the cheek swelling, the mother also noticed that Nitya's eyes and skin look slightly yellowish in color. Initially, the mother said that the skin and eyes looked light yellow in color, but as the time passed, they have started to appear dark yellow now. On direct questioning, the mother also said that the child has been passing light yellow colored stools since last 5 days, but however has been passing normal colored urine. For the above complaints, Nitya was shown to a local practitioner in Pune, where the doctor as well as the parents noticed that she had bluish colored patches over her chest. So some symptomatic treatment was given and Nitya was taken home. Later during the day, the mother noticed that these patches were slightly increasing in nature. So the one patch which was there on the chest gradually progressed to involve now the abdomen, the upper and the lower limbs eventually, with a total of 5 lesions. On questioning, there was no history of fever, vomiting, loose stools, or abdominal distension. No history of trauma over the cheek. Mother does not give history of staining of the diaper when the child micturates on direct questioning. No history of a stormy NICU course. Administration of any IV antibiotics or IV drugs. Or no history of exchange transfusion done. No history of excessive irritability, lethargy, seizures, or any hypoglycemic events after birth. The mother also does not say that the child has any history of progressive pallor. There is no history of administration of any sugar water, honey, fruit juices to the child after birth. There is no history of any drug consumption. On asking for family history, there is no family history of jaundice or any other liver disease. and no history of recurrent blood transfusions or any other maternal infections. Hearing and vision were apparently normal as was told by the mother.
Can you just explain why you asked all this negative history?
Sure, sir. So for starting first, I asked for history of fever, vomiting, loose stools, and abdominal distension. So hepatitis or sepsis per se may give rise to cholestasis and jaundice, and even viral hepatitis. For history of trauma over the cheek, because the child has a cheek swelling.
Yeah.
For staining of the diapers, I asked the mother if the child is having a high colored urine and dark colored urine which is staining the diaper in order to rule out cholestasis. But however, there is history of passing of light or pale color stools. History of stormy NICU course because
did you ask something regarding maturation? Some more information regarding maturation?
Yeah, the color of the urine, whether it was cola colored or
okay, and painful maturation.
Yes, sir. So painful micturition, I mean, the child did not wince on micturition and there were no significant urinary complaints, just to rule out the possibility of urosepsis causing jaundice and the current conditions, sir.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, so there is no history of a stormy NICU course because premature babies with sepsis are prone to development of jaundice and eventually cholestasis. Any administration of IV antibiotics during the hospital course or NICU course or history of exchange transfusion. No history of excessive irritability, lethargy, seizures, hypoglycemic episodes. This was in order to rule out metabolic causes causing jaundice, sir. Like sir, galactosemia, fructosemia, tyrosinemia.
Yeah.
Yes. There is no history of progressive pallor, sir, because progressive pallor may indicate some hemolytic disease and higher. So I just wanted to rule the possibility of that out. No history of administration of sugar water, honey, or fruit juices. Very rare condition again, but just like to rule out the possibility of hereditary fructose intolerance in this case. Very rare, but I've kept it in the list of my references. No history of drug consumption, sir. So any drug consumption in the form of any antibiotics or any Ayurvedic preparations that has been given to the child after birth.
Which drugs can cause hepatitis? Can you just name a few drugs?
So few drugs like anti-tubercular drugs like isoniazid, sir. Even some antibiotics like amoxicillin or ampicillin or sulfa group of drugs can also give rise to hepatitis, sir.
And which anti-epileptics?
So phenytoin.
Yeah.
So yeah, phenytoin can possibly be toxic, sir.
Yeah. Valproic acid?
Yes, sir. Even valparin also has hepatotoxicity.
Okay.
So there is no family history of jaundice or any other liver disease in the family. This is in order to rule out any hereditary or familial cause of liver disease or jaundice, sir. And no history of maternal infections and no history of recurrent blood transfusions, sir, in the family. Hearing and vision was apparently normal, so this is again to rule out the possibility that the hearing and vision of the child is well preserved and maintained. Sir, I just asked how I asked for these complaints was I asked the mother that does the child startle on any loud noise, or does the child follow an object, a colorful object, which the mother tries to show the child? So the mother said the child does all of that, sir. Again, some conditions such as cross group of infections can give rise to hearing loss or some visual problems. Hence, I've asked these complaints.
Yeah, good. Yeah, proceed.
So briefly, just moving to the antenatal history, since it could be significant in our case. The mother is a 23-year-old who's been married for last 2 years. She was
Dr. Lalwani, can you hear me? He'll be right back. I think his internet has gone down.
I think his internet is gone. We'll just wait for a minute or two.
Sir, he'll be joining in 2 minutes, sir.
Did he say that the urine color was normal?
High colored. I think he said it was high
नाही
colored.
नाही मला असं वाटतं की नॉर्मल म्हटल्यासारखं वाटतंय कलर युरिन कलर
No, initially it was normal.
चाइल्ड वॉज
Initially,
जॉन्डिस्ड
yeah, initially it was normal, and then last few days it was high colored. असं बहुतेक मला वाटतं. Yes.
I don't know whether the cheek swelling appear first or all these things appear first. ते मला नाही समजलं.
Yeah.
The march of events.
Yeah.
From
She
what
got-
I think the main complaint was cheek swelling.
Cheek swelling.
Oh.
The child was brought for cheek swelling.
So cheek swelling, and there's petechial or some kind of a rash all over
Rash.
the body.
Yeah.
And then there was appearance of jaundice associated with little pale stools and normal urine. And in the otherwise normal child, otherwise
Yeah,
means
yeah.
not a very sick ICU kind of a baby,
Yeah.
असं काहीतरी वाटलं मला.
I'm
It's
really sorry.
reasonably normal milestones without consanguinity.
I'm really sorry for the short delay because there's some net connection problem. Are my slides visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. So, ma'am, I was just going through the questions that were being asked. So, ma'am, the first complaint the mother noticed was the cheek swelling, followed by the same day the mother also noticed the jaundice. After which she noticed the stool color and the patches all over the body. The patches all over the body, she did not notice it herself, but when the child was taken to a local practitioner, it was noticed there by the parents as well as the doctor.
Can you describe that swelling a little more? I wanted to know whether it appeared slowly or it suddenly appeared and it remained
Yes,
that
so
way.
yes,
What
ma'am.
was the color of the swelling?
Yes, ma'am. I actually examined I've told all of that in detail in my examinatory findings, but still to elaborate. So the swelling was, yes, on history, ma'am, 7 days back, the mother noticed a cheek swelling initially, which was small pea size, which was the pea size, ma'am, which gradually progressed over the next 3 days to attain a size of a lemon. And the swelling after 3 days has halted there. It hasn't progressed beyond that. So from a pea size to a lemon, in 3 days it increased. It halted at 3 days, and till the time of presentation, it has been the size of a lemon, ma'am.
Was it painful? Not painful.
Not painful to touch. Mother categorically said that whenever she used to touch the swelling, the child used to never cry or wince.
Okay,
But
go
it
ahead.
was firm to touch. Yes, so I was continuing with my antenatal history. There was no history of fever, rash, or lymphadenopathy during the first trimester or any time during pregnancy. There was no history of pruritus in the mother during pregnancy. No history of prolonged PV leak during delivery. And the mother's blood group was O positive. And after birth, the baby's blood group was checked, which was A positive. So the birth history of the child was born full-term normal vaginal delivery in a private hospital, was said to have cried immediately after birth. Birth weight was said to be 2.4 kgs. There was history of NICU stay for 2 days in view of neonatal hyperbilirubinemia, for which the child received phototherapy for 2 days as per the mother. There was no history of any IV medications being given or any central lines or umbilical catheters which were inserted, as told by mother on history. Immunization history wise, the child has been immunized with BCG, hepatitis B, 2 doses of OPV, 2 doses of Pentavac vaccine, 2 doses of Rotacil, and single dose of injectable polio vaccine. Diet wise, the child has been exclusively breastfed since birth. Developmental wise, the child has a social smile and has a partial neck holding. Anthropometry wise, the child weighs about 4.2 kilograms. with a length of 58 centimeters and a head circumference of 38 centimeters. As you can see, height is less than the first centile, the length is first to third centile, and the head circumference is again first to third centile, and weight for length is again first to third centile. Moving to my general examination. On general examination,
can you just tell your inference from the anthropometry?
Sure, sir. So the child's weight is less than the first centile. So definitely it's an acute event. The length is between first to third centile, and the head circumference again first to third centile. Since the birth weight is 2.4 kgs, there is some amount of growth restriction or IUGR there intranatally, maybe possibly. So because ideally at about 5 months of age, the weight should be double. So the child is now 3.5 months. The birth weight was 2.4 kgs. Double of that should be 4.8 kgs. The child is around 4.2 kgs right now. So I think the child is catching up eventually. And since I won't label him that he's not growing well or under MAM or SAM right now.
So if you look at the weight gain from birth till 3.5 months, it seems to be less than 2 kg.
Yes, about 1.8 kilograms.
Right. So probably slightly lower than expected weight gain.
Definitely, slightly lower than expected. So maybe the child is catching up as the child's birth weight is also less, 2.4 kgs.
Are you sure it's less than one centile, first centile?
Sorry?
Are you sure it's less than first centile weight?
Yes, sir. On plotting on the growth chart, sir, it's coming less than first centile.
Okay.
Should I proceed forward or sir?
Yeah, please.
You can proceed.
Sure. On general examination, the child was active, playful. The child was not sick looking. AF was at level 2 by 2 centimeters, pulsatile. The eyes appeared yellowish on the sclera. There was no obvious cataract noted. Fundus examination done was normal according to me. And there were no signs of vitamin A deficiency noted. There were no dysmorphic features that were noted. The right cheek swelling, describing the cheek swelling in detail, it was a solitary lesion, 1.5 by 1.5 centimeters, firm in consistency. It was non-fluctuating, and it was a non-tender swelling. The skin over the swelling appeared to have a bluish hue or bluish tinge. Explaining more about the patches, there were multiple ecchymotic patches seen over the trunk, abdomen, and the limbs, which were measuring around 1 by 1 centimeters. There was one Mongolian spot present over the sacral region. On taking the vitals of the child was afebrile with a heart rate of 120 per minute, respiratory rate of 30 per minute, CRT was less than 3 seconds, peripheral pulses were well felt, BPs were 88 by 52, sugars were 130 mg per dl, ictus was appreciated, mild pallor was appreciated, no edema, cyanosis or lymphadenopathy was appreciated, spinal examination was normal, no signs of fat-soluble vitamin C deficiency were noted, or no other signs of liver failure were seen. Should I proceed to my systemic examination?
Can you just summarize from your history the differentials?
Yes, sir. So we have a 3.5-month-old non-sick looking infant who has been brought with complaints of a right-sided cheek swelling with yellowish discoloration of the mucous membranes, along with passage of light or pale colored stools with history of multiple bluish patches all over the body. So we have to rule out the possibility in this case of any liver pathology in the form of neonatal cholestasis. So in neonatal hepatitis or biliary atresia or even neonatal infectious causes of neonatal hepatitis has to be.
What about failure to thrive? Does this child have it or not?
Sir, actually the child is about 3.5 months, and so the child is failing to thrive to some extent because of the acute insult right now, sir.
Dr. Karambekar sir, Dr. Bavdekar sir, any questions from your side?
Just a couple of things. I don't know if you talked about the history of vitamin K injection to this child.
Yes, I haven't mentioned that in the history, but on asking the mother, some mother was unaware that if any injection was given immediately after the birth. But since it was a private hospital, the mother does not tell it on history. But yeah, so possibility of late onset SDN also has to be ruled out. But sir, that less likely would come with complaints of pale colored stools and jaundice.
Dr. Vishnu wants to ask something.
Siddhant, I wanted to know what was the color of the urine. If I mistake not, you said
Yeah,
that
so
it was
ma'am,
not.
so ma'am, on asking the mother on history, the mother said that the urine was, it was not high colored and it was not dark enough to stain the diaper. But ma'am, when actually we saw it, it was actually staining the diaper. So the mother was actually not aware of the fact that it's actually a dark colored urine. Hello?
Siddhant, if I say, that the cheek swelling was actually, I'm just for the sake of discussion,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
cheek swelling was actually a hematoma.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
some reason, it could be some coagulation disorder or something. And that blood which was getting hemolyzed, that produced the jaundice, and therefore there was jaundice. There was consumption of the platelets, and therefore there was petechial, because child was apparently okay till 3 months of age, and the whole thing started only 7-8 days back. I
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
know that we have got experts on the panel. If biliary atresia and these things can develop with a apparently normal post-neonatal period, and now they're getting something like this.
Ma'am, pale colored
I want somebody else to correct me if
pale color stools won't be explained because of the fact of increasing hemolysis, ma'am. It is a very specific complaint in this case, and hence I was keeping the possibility of biliary atresia in mind.
Okay, suppose if it is this liver and then there were petechial and all those things, I think that liver should be very sick liver, right?
Agreed, ma'am. But I mean, in biliary atresias, ma'am, usually the children are not sick looking. They are apparently well. They're doing well. Agreed. That is usually in AGA babies who are not failing to thrive and are doing extremely well. But ma'am, since the child has been active, has never been sick since her birth. Sorry.
So on the basis of the history that you have so far, what may be now you may be knowing the final diagnosis, but what do you think that swelling was until this particular?
Ma'am, just going on to the swelling, moving on to the picture, if you appreciate...
No, you showed that picture, but what is your interpretation?
Ma'am, it could be a hematoma or some accumulation of blood because there are multiple ecchymotic patches all over the body. So possibly that could also be a hematoma that has been caused because of the coagulation issue, ma'am, right?
Can I ask one question?
Yes, Vishnu.
Siddhant, you said there are ecchymosis and patches and there is a cheek swelling, but at the same time you are saying there is no signs of fat soluble vitamin deficiency. So these are two contradictory things, because if you have a vitamin K deficiency, so we say that it is a fat soluble vitamin deficiency, and if it is there, then it is a chronic process. It is not something which is acute. Sometimes in acute injury we get a cholestatic like feature, but this is something which is chronic.
Sir, I tried examining the eyes for any signs of vitamin A deficiency, for vitamin A, D, E, and K specifically.
K is there.
Pardon, sir?
Vitamin K deficiency you have, ecchymosis and patches.
Yes, agreed. So for vitamin A on ophthal examinations, I could not spot any Bitot spots or xerophthalmia or any conjunctival xerosis. So hence I didn't comment about vitamin A deficiency. And for about E and K, sir, vitamin E will present with extensive hemolysis. So which is not in this case, I am assuming on the history. So, and there are no, yes, sir. Should I proceed to my systemic examination? Yeah. So on systemic examination, on per abdominal examination, on inspection, ecchymotic patches were seen over the abdomen. Mild abdominal distension was appreciated. There were no scars, dilated veins over the abdomen. On palpation, the liver was palpable about 4 centimeters below the right costal margin, with a liver span of about 8 centimeters, with rounded borders.
असं बंदच झालं होतं.
With 8 centimeters with rounded borders and firm consistency of the liver. The hepatomegaly was non-tender. Spleen was palpable about 3 centimeters below the left costal margin and was again firm in consistency. And there was no mass palpated just below the edge of the liver.
Can you just elaborate about the liver span, please?
Yes, sir. So,
what is the normal liver span from neonate onwards?
Yes, sir. So the normal liver span in a neonate starts at about 4.5 to 5 centimeters, which gradually progresses to attain a size of about 8 to 10 centimeters in an adolescent age group. So it's slightly different in boys and girls, with the girls having a slightly smaller liver span as compared to boys, sir. So, a liver span of 8 centimeters in this child is definitely pathological for her age.
Yeah. How do you palpate a liver? What is tidal percussion? Can you just mention it, because you won't be able to show it?
Yes, sir. So basically, moving. I mean, first for palpating the liver, I go from the right iliac fossa upwards, where I could feel the resistance, or where I can palpate the liver, and from the second intercostal space on the right side, I go down percussing till I get a dull note. And whenever I get a dull note, I measure the distance between the dull note on top and the palpated lower edge of the liver down, and then I take the distance of that.
Yeah, so that is the liver span. So what is tidal percussion?
So while so basically while I'm not sure about it, sir. I've read about it, but I'm just.
Sumit, you need to explain.
Yeah, basically in tidal percussion, you just go from your second intercostal space in the midclavicular line downwards. Once you get a liver dullness, you ask the child to take a deep breath, inspiration, so that if you get a resonant note, that means the liver has been pushed down. But if there is some pleural effusion or any collection there, then you get a dull note still. So that differentiates the liver margin from any pleural effusion.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So 4 centimeter liver at 3 months is normal, or in that?
It's abnormal. So about so around at birth or in the first few months of infancy, the liver can be palpable about 2 centimeters.
Yeah.
But so anything more than 2 centimeters should be. I mean, the possibility, if it's more than 2 centimeters, find out the liver span, and anything more than definitely liver span of 5 to 7 centimeters, 5 to 6 centimeters is pathological in this age group.
Okay. And what is Hackett's grading of splenomegaly?
So Hackett's grading, there are 5 grades from grade 1 to grade 5. So, sorry, grade 0 to grade 5. So basically the first stages is when you can't palpate the liver at all. The next is when you can just palpate the tip of the liver. Then when the tip of the liver to the spleen, I'm really sorry. And next, when the sphenic tip is between the costal margin and the umbilicus, then it's below the umbilicus, and then the next grade it goes till the pubic symphysis and accommodates the pubic symphysis.
On which side does it progress?
So usually in the infancy, so initially gradually it progresses downwards, but as age group advances, it progresses diagonally, sir, towards the right iliac fossa.
Yeah, please proceed.
Siddhant, Dr. Rajesh Kulkarni has asked one question at this point. What mass below the liver are you looking for?
Yes, ma'am. So sometimes, very rarely, you can possibly palpate a mass below the liver. It possibly could be a choledochal cyst. Even gallbladder could be palpated, but less likely. Even choledochal cyst, if present, ma'am, according to the classic triad, which is rarely seen, not always can you palpate a mass, but could be a possibility. So that was choledochal cyst, basically, yeah. On percussion, no free fluid was present in the abdomen. Auscultation-wise, the bowel sounds were well heard, no bruit were heard, and the hernial sites and genitals were normal. On systemic examination, cardiac examination, respiratory examination are eventful. And the CNS examination, child was active, playful with cry, tone, and activity were normal. Again, a normal CNS examination. So in view of my current history and my examination findings, we have a 3.5-month-old non-sick looking infant with jaundice and pale color stools, along with multiple ecchymotic patches all over the body. possibly could be a case of neonatal cholestasis. Differentials after the history and examination I should rule out is definitely one is biliary atresia and the possibility of neonatal hepatitis also, because the child has been slightly IUGR, the birth weight has been 2.4 kgs. Hello.
Can you define neonatal cholestasis?
Yes, sir. So neonatal cholestasis is basically direct hyperbilirubinemia, which is present, direct hyperbilirubinemia, and direct hyperbilirubinemia, which is more than 1 mg per dl if the total direct bilirubin is more than 1 mg per dl if the total serum bilirubin is less than 5. And if it's more than 5, it is 20% of the serum bilirubin, sir. Total serum.
Yeah. How do you classify neonatal cholestasis?
So it could be intrahepatic or extrahepatic neonatal cholestasis.
Yeah.
So it could be anywhere, any block or abnormal pathology inside the liver or outside the liver, as I have mentioned. So we have to progress to find out possibilities of both, and that on investigations and histories. So again, on history, that one thing, usually in neonatal cholestasis, the child will be sick looking, and in cases of biliary atresia, the child will be well looking. Hello.
Yeah.
There are a few questions at this point of time.
Sure.
Dr. Vishnu Biradar is asking you, what is the DD of cheek swelling? And Dr. Pujari madam is asking you, what is the DD of ecchymotic patches?
So ma'am.
And I have one question. Why this is not one of the storage disorders?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, first answering first questions first, ma'am. So ecchymotic patches, ma'am, I'm thinking in this case because it possibly could be a liver condition, vitamin K deficiency, maybe in this state, which again will derange the 2, 7, 9, and 10 factors, making the child more prone for coagulopathy. The ecchymosis could explain that. And differentials for cheek swelling in this age and this condition, ma'am, again, I would think of an hematoma first, because less likely it's an abscess, or less likely with the progress, it has progressed over 3 days to attain this size. It either could be an abscess or could be hematoma. Abscess, ma'am, there is no history of fever, whereas it could be possibly a hematoma, and the discoloration that is there over the swelling again goes more in favor of a hematoma.
Was it a battered baby? Can it be a battered baby? Two different illnesses.
Ma'am, could be
because
battered.
This, all of us see lot of liver patients, but this is quite peculiar, unusual.
Yes, ma'am.
That's why everyone is asking the same question again.
No, ma'am, agreed, ma'am. Ma'am, battered baby. So a battered baby will also have multiple ecchymotic patches all over the body, but we have to take into considerations the other injuries as well. So basically, any pathological fractures at unusual sites, or bruise, other form, not only ecchymosis, but bruises or any injuries other than the usual sites.
You know, Rajesh Kulkarni has one comment. Instead of biliary atresia, it would be better to say biliary obstruction partial.
Yeah, could be, ma'am. But ma'am, the fact that the child is now passing clay-colored stools, so ma'am, biliary atresia is a misnomer, as we have all read. It could be signs of biliary obstruction also. Yes, ma'am.
Can it be some hematoma?
I think Rajesh is not able to unmute, so I am reading all his comments. As stools are pigmented and not classically chalky white, is what he says.
I have unmuted Rajesh.
Dr. Bavdekar to pitch in and tell us.
Rajesh has been unmuted, madam.
Okay.
So, ma'am, answering the stool color, so ma'am, it's not always that we'll get a classical chalky colored stool in every case of neonatal cholestasis. So, ma'am, we have a stool color chart which has to be followed, ma'am. If that chart is followed, so there are 7 grades in that. And ma'am, if you see, this tool kind of fits in the yellow alert sign. So, ma'am, though we think that it's yellow, it's actually not very much pigmented. So it still will be classified as a light or pale colored stool. That's what I
think
feel.
that's a learning point for all postgraduates who are attending this, that, 7, that chart of for the biliary for pale colored stool, I think so.
So not, ma'am, it's classically is not the scene that every time we'll get a child with classical pale colored stools. it could be possible that we get slight pigmentary stools also. I mean, slight yellowish color, but you have to know to distinguish the abnormal from normal using the stool color charts, man, which are available now everywhere.
Can it be some hematological malignancy? Hepatosplenomegaly with ecchymosis with fatigue?
Yeah, sir, it could be hematological malignancy, but sir, if we consider and take all the constellation of symptoms, why pale colored stools in why pale colored stools in malignancy, sir? But it's
obstruction, some lymphadenopathy obstructing the bile duct?
Could be possible, sir. That could be possible, sir. Yes.
Can it be extramedullary hematopoiesis?
So extramedullary hematopoiesis will be basically something like blueberry muffin spots, which are very, so they are small, nodular, very pinkish and well circumscribed, sir. On feel, these didn't feel and look like blueberry muffin spots or extramedullary hematopoiesis. And the fact that the child already had hematoma, sir, I thought it was a ecchymosis more than a blueberry muffin spot or a extramedullary hematopoiesis.
Okay, one more interesting question from Ambike madam. What is the condition where you get alternate pale and yellow stools? And sometimes that means sometimes pale, sometimes yellow.
Yeah, so ma'am, neonatal hepatitis itself can give you alternating pale or yellow color stools first. Even your choledochal cyst can give rise to intermittent jaundice and intermittent clay and pigmented stools, ma'am. So neonatal hepatitis per se can also give intermittent pale and pigmented stools. But in biliary atresia, usually it's pale for a prolonged period, ma'am. You'll always get history of pale colored or light colored stools being passed.
Okay.
Can it be any congenital infection with secondary neonatal cholestasis?
Yes, sir. So for congenital infections, possibly TORCH group of infections, sir, there is no, first of all, starting from ANC antenatal period, there is no history of any fever, rash or lymphadenopathy in any of the trimesters, but that may not be always the history. But sir, other findings in the form of, there were no history of any cataracts or no history of any changes or chorioretinitis on the fundus. Agreed that the child is slightly, the anthropometrical parameters are slightly on the lower side. But sir, I mean, in this case, I don't think it most likely fits into but it could be. We should always keep the possibility of congenital infections as a possibility for neonatal cholestasis. So usually with the neonatal, the congenital infections will come with cataracts, chorioretinitis, microcephaly, ISGR babies, or premature babies.
So to take forward a point which Madhu raised, this is really not a very atypical presentation of a neonatal cholestasis syndrome. In fact, it is quite typical of some of the neonatal cholestasis coming to you with just part of neonatal cholestasis, but the actual presenting feature is either a hematoma, either it's an intracranial bleed or a hematoma or body hematoma. It's not very uncommon. But with the history that you have got, the findings that you have got, that you have a liver disease, which seems to be there based on the hepatosplenomegaly and the jaundice, and some hematomas or ecchymotic causes across the body. If you're looking at putting both of these together, then it's either a liver disease with a coagulopathy, which seems unlikely because if it's a coagulopathy, it would be a much sicker child by now. Or it's a liver disease with vitamin K deficiency. And if it's a liver disease with vitamin K deficiency, it is usually a secondary vitamin K deficiency, which is going to resolve. And it is usually a biliary disease that causes vitamin K deficiency, while it is an intrahepatic or a primary liver disease that causes coagulopathy. So whether it's a biliary atresia or a biliary bile duct paucity or anything, it is biliary. That is what it tells us, at least right now, based on what we have got.
Yes. Any more questions?
How would you proceed in such a case? What would next would you do?
Yes, sir. So first, I mean, as per the schema, we first look if the child is a sick-looking child or a well-looking child. After that baseline, I would try to stabilize the child, however he or she is. Next, I would try to do few basic set of investigations in order to achieve or come to a diagnosis. I would like to do a CBC with a septic screen. On the CBC, I would try to look at the hemoglobin, the platelet counts, the WBC, and anemia, if any. Then I would like to do LFTs. And liver function tests, so I would like to find out direct or indirect hyperbilirubinemia, the level of direct hyperbilirubinemia, if any, the enzymes, if they are raised or if they are normal. I would like to do a coagulation profile to find out any alterations or any form of coagulopathy and deranged PTINR. I would also like to do a gamma glutamyl transpeptidase or a GGT test that would help to differentiate between an obstructive biliary disease from a non-obstructive biliary disease. Then I would also like to do thyroid function tests in order to rule out the possibility of hypothyroidism and do serology in general. And more specific tests, moving towards more specific tests, I would like to do a plain USG abdomen, but a fasting USG abdomen. So ideally we keep the infant fasting for about 3 to 4 hours, and we tell our radiologist what all to look for. So the features that we want to look for any possibility of any choledochal cysts. If we are wanting to rule out the possibility of biliary atresia, we have to ask our radiologist to visualize the gallbladder. If it's not visualized, and if it is visualized, how big it is, what is the length of the gallbladder, how is the lining of the gallbladder, is there any presence of triangular cord sign? And after that, we feed the child in front of the radiologist, and we also see for the contraction of the gallbladder. So that would roughly, and the visualization of the common bile duct. That would give us a rough idea about the possibility of the diagnosis. And I would also like to send a urine for reducing substances just to rule out metabolic conditions like galactosemia, which is very unlikely in my case though. And if we are suspecting any TORCH group or any congenital infections causing this condition, we would send a TORCH panel in this case. More specific, if it's pointing towards one of the TORCH group of illnesses, then we send a PCR to confirm this. And eventually, if nothing comes.
You said, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, ma'am.
You just said torch. So, which amongst the torch is that you would like to, or you want to send all of them?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
All of them.
Ma'am, CMV and basically CMV and rubella. Hello.
We have got excellent infectious disease specialist in the panel. So I think we can get a...
So ma'am, what one mistake is done that we usually send the whole IgG and IgM panel completely. Actually, even the IgM panel is of not great significance. The PCR should be done in order to confirm a diagnosis. So
my question is it T, is it O, is it R, is it C, H, S? Which one is more likely? Or we want to send a whole laundry list? No,
ma'am. So, ma'am, usually cytomegalovirus or possibility of rubella. Cytomegalovirus more, ma'am.
Okay. Not toxoplasma.
Ma'am.
Not syphilis, not this thing.
Ma'am, ma'am, could be, but less likely.
Okay. How does rubella present at 3.5 months of age?
So, ma'am, rubella, the children... Congenital rubella, yes, ma'am. So the children can have cataracts, children can have chorioretinitis, can have encephalitis, and can have
liver disease? What about liver?
Ma'am, they can have hepatosplenomegaly, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. No, but this kind of liver that we are describing. Just for the sake of discussion.
Ma'am, more of a neonatal hepatitis kind of a picture, ma'am.
Okay, let's ask the experts. Dr. Mankar sir or Dr. Kulkarni sir or Bawdekar sir?
CMV is one of the most likely thing which can happen, but the CMV will cause jaundice. It can cause also obstructive jaundice in the neonatal period, But most of the time, the obstructive jaundice because of the CMV infection tend to regress by around 3 months of age. With or without treatment also, it try to regress of its own. But the CMV infection will also have other features like chorioretinitis, hepatosplenomegaly, thrombocytopenia, lung involvement is pretty common with this thing. CNS involvement, paraventricular calcification, seizures, all are common with CMV involvement. Yes, syphilis, madam said, yes, it is likely, but the clinical feature of the baby is not fitting into the syphilis. The mother was also screened with the VDRL test. The VDRL test of this child was, mother of this child was negative. The baby never had a clinical features like snuffles, no signs of cold, no fever at all, no raggeds. The skin was absolutely normal. There was no peeling of the skin. Hepatosplenomegaly is one of the feature of your congenital syphilis, and other features are also, means the bony changes and everything were not there. So we never thought of the syphilis in this child. But yes, CMV, we definitely we have sent PCR of CMV for this child.
So
What
actually, I
about
have
rubella, Dr. Mankar? What about rubella?
Yes, rubella also, the rubella commonly present with microcephaly. Though the head circumference of this child was absolutely normal, no cataract, no other features suggestive of rubella, heart disease, peripheral pulmonary stenosis,
Nothing was there.
ASD, all these
no
things not there. Thrombocytopenia not there, rash,
Absolutely.
other features and were not there.
So the pre-test probability of this being rubella was extremely low, I think.
Low.
That's what you are trying to say.
Yes, ma'am.
HIV also can present like this sometimes, but the thing, the mothers, we have seen the mother's card. The mother card was showing ELISA was non-reactive.
Okay.
So we have ruled out most of the torch group of infections. CMV was more likely, so we have sent PCR.
Actually, I have elaborated a few investigations that we have done at our institute, but I would like to answer other questions before proceeding to that. Or should I proceed to that, ma'am?
Yeah, go ahead. Whatever. We have got plenty of time.
Yeah. So we did a fasting USG abdomen of this child, as I mentioned before. Findings was suggestive of a suspicious triangular cord sign. A well-distended gallbladder was not seen, and a fusiform structure was seen in the region of the gallbladder fossa. Coagulation profile in that child was...
That many PGs are attending. Please explain what is triangular cord sign for everybody.
Yes, ma'am. So triangular cord sign is basically the fibrotic remnant of the bile duct, ma'am, which is seen on radiological finding.
Where is it seen?
So it is seen at the junction of the
Portal vein.
Portal veins. Yes. So, ma'am, triangular cord sign is again one of the hallmark features of biliary atresia, and the coagulation profile which was done in our child was deranged, which was corrected eventually after giving vitamin K 5 mg injection IV, and we even did a CBC which showed HB of around 8, TLC count of 16,300, and platelet counts were normal. LFTs were done in our kid, which showed a total bilirubin of 9 with a direct component of 7. SGPT was normal, SGOT was elevated slightly. Total proteins and albumin were normal. So, ma'am, since albumin is normal here, I mean, albumin is usually in chronic liver conditions, albumin is reduced. Whereas if it's an acute insult, it is the PTINR that usually takes the hit. And we sent a urine for reducing substances in our case, which was negative to rule out galactosemia. Since sir said that we were possibly thinking of CMV as our CMV hepatitis as our possibility in this case, we did send an IgM we sent a torch panel for only IgM, which the CMV IgM turned positive by ELISA method. But since it is not significant, only doing IgM, we sent a quantitative PCR. The PCR in this case was positive. However, the copies were only 255. So again, one more message that I would like to give is that the positivity of a PCR report does not label it as CMV positive or negative. It also has to be the number of copies that are important. So usually when we see cases of symptomatic CMV hepatitis or symptomatic CMV disease, the copies are in thousands or lakhs. So usually any copies that are less than 500 or less than 300, we don't consider significant. Copies have to be significantly higher. It has to be in thousands or lakhs. Hence, the diagnosis of CMV was less likely in this case because the DNA copies were not high. Serum GGT was done, which was elevated. It was 329. So serum GGT elevated usually points towards an obstructive liver disease, whereas it could be normal or low in conditions like PFIC, the progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis. The type 1 and type 2 may show a normal or a low reading of GGT. It is a type 3 that usually shows the higher reading. And
that's a good question here. Suppose if CMV IgM antibody you got positive, in case you got negative, then will you still proceed with the quantitative PCR? Yes.
Ideally, ma'am, they say that instead of going for IgM, you should do PCR, which is more specific.
Okay.
So, ma'am, I should have done PCR first rather in an ideal situation, ma'am.
Okay.
And ma'am, GGT and even alkaline phosphatase, I want to stress on this. Even in obstructive lesions of the liver, obstructive disease of the liver, alkaline phosphatase is risen, but it is other conditions also like vitamin D deficiency can give a rise in alkaline phosphatase. So GGT is very specific. Hence, a GGT was also documented in our case.
Dr. Rajesh Kulkarni wants to ask one question. Can you unmute and ask, Rajesh? Or I'll ask his question. What is the difference between urine for reducing substances and urine NGRS? And which one would you do? What percentage of biliary atresia will have triangular cord sign?
Okay, ma'am.
The first question is difference between urine for reducing substance and NGRS.
I'm not sure about urine NGRS, ma'am, the full form. But urine for reducing substances, usually we do for ruling out the possibility of metabolic conditions like galactosemia. And
the long form is non-glucose reducing substances. Now you can maybe have.
Yes, sir. So, non-glucose reducing substances. So, I mean, basically it will NGR. So, usually in case of galactosemia, you will get urine for reducing non-glucose reducing substances positive.
I'll just unmute Rajesh too, so that he can elaborate.
Yeah, I think so. Please do that.
Rajesh, you can unmute.
Hi, Rajesh. Please comment.
Rajesh, we are not able to hear.
So it's negative dextrostrict, but positive Benedict. That is classic.
Yes, sir.
As the dextrostrict is based on glucose oxidase, which will not turn positive with galactose, which is present there.
So actually,
but with Benedict, it will be there.
Yes.
Dr. Bavdekar, are you there in the panel or you have left?
Yeah, I'm there.
Achha, can you explain this, which Rajesh has asked us? What percentage of biliary atresia will have triangular cord sign?
In the present situation where we rarely see, or our sonologists rarely do comment on a triangular cord sign. When we have asked a sonologist to have specifically look at it, for whatever reason, I'm not too sure whether this problem is with us, but they have not been able to demonstrate that. Mm-hmm. However, the literature says it's a very good and a simple test for suggestion. It's not diagnostic by itself. So it's a suggestion that this is a biliary atresia. That is what the triangular cord sign is for. It's a sonological based sign. But I'm just a little concerned about the way this discussion is going. You have a child who has got a clay colored stools, or not very well pigmented stools, high colored urine, you don't see a gallbladder, you have a high GGT, your sonologist is talking about a possible triangular cord sign, child is already 3.5 months, why are we thinking about CMV and the rest and not trying to at least make sure that the diagnosis is not of biliary atresia?
Yeah, yes, sir. So basically, our strongest suspicion was of biliary atresia, but at the same time, since the child was 2.54 kg, slightly IUGR, we just wanted to rule out the possibility of any CMV infection or TORCH group of infections.
Right. I mean, this is the standard teaching, and there may be other, since you've seen the child, you maybe know the child better. But we strongly advise don't send a TORCH titer. And not especially when you have got such features. If you have got significant other features like calcification, which you mentioned, or congenital heart.
Actually,
yes.
Yeah, so actually I've included the radiologist too. Because of the COVID situation, there were 2 sonographies done. The first was done by a junior faculty, which was eventually done by senior faculty 2 days later. So in between, the first USG was not very suggestive of an absent gallbladder. The first USG said gallbladder is slightly visualized. So we were having a slight diagnostic dilemma that time. We didn't have the seniors because there were COVID duties going on. So in that interim of 2 days and not wasting time for 2 days, sir, we landed up doing the TORCH group of titers, and we didn't have an exact report of USG suggestive of biliary atresia in the first attempt itself. Hence, in those 2 days, not to waste time, we progressed with these investigations.
Okay.
Definitely, we would also like to do a liver biopsy. Yes, sir.
Yes. 9.
Hello. I would also like to do a liver biopsy in this case in order to confirm the findings of biliary atresia or neonatal hepatitis. And usually the conventional HIDA scan that was done is not done in our setup because obviously we land up wasting some time for priming and since all majority of the children present usually at a later date, not in the initial few weeks or months, time is of utmost importance, and the investigation of choice would be that of intraoperative cholangiography.
Did you biopsy this child?
Yes, sir. We did indeed biopsy this child. So in the biopsy findings were suggestive of florid bile duct tubular proliferation with lymphoplasmacytic infiltrates with bile plugs seen in the ducts, which was suggestive of biliary atresia, sir. Yeah. So portal tracts were fibrous showing lymphoplasmacytic infiltrates with few neutrophils and eosinophils. Florid proliferation, ductular proliferation noted with occasional bile plugs. No evidence of paucity seen, and enlarged hepatocytes with rosetting pattern. And there was also giant cell transformation. And yeah, Mason's trichrome showed mild portal fibrosis. Immunohistochemistry was inconclusive. Sorry.
Bowdekar sir, can you just comment on this report?
This is a little, I mean, this report is not very typical of an atresia. There are features of atresia, but which is basically the widened portal tract which you have got and the florid bile duct proliferation with bile plugs. So that's definitely suggestive of a biliary atresia. But I cannot explain the giant cell transformation and rosetting going on, because if it's a giant cell so what we're really saying is it's a biliary atresia with some element of neonatal hepatitis, both, which is a little unusual to get unless there are two different things happening or the child has something super added going on, because you would just see the first part what is described above. You just see that. You would just see the widened portal tract, bile duct proliferation, maybe fibrosis, maybe cirrhosis, but it is unusual to see significant giant cell transformation in a typical classical biliary atresia. So that's something that we need to think whether it's something else that is being mistaken for a biliary atresia. But of course, the only way to move forward will be a peroperative cholangiography. The question is whether you would want to do that. So let me ask the next question. What did you do to this child?
Sir, so after the liver biopsy, we took the child up for doing a portoenterostomy procedure, sir.
Yeah, but I'm sure they would have done a peroperative cholangiography before doing the
Yes, sir. So intraoperative cholangiography was done, which indeed confirmed the findings of biliary atresia, and then the Kasai's photoenterostomy was done, sir.
Okay. What was the time from the when you child actually came to your hospital till the time you actually went with the surgery? How many days went?
Around about 5 days, sir. 5 to 6 days.
Okay, that's
because we were having a lot. So in an ideal scenario, if a neonatal cholestasis comes to hospital, the things are fast lined. But because of the current COVID pandemic and the number of people working being less, I mean, it's definitely not an excuse, but a slight delay of about 5 days. So because time is of utmost importance in our case, because the child is already 3.5 months of age and is presented quite late.
What are the guidelines for a diagnosed biliary atresia of 3.5 to 4 months? Is the guideline to go in for photoenterostomy or
so depending on how the child is, if there are already signs suggestive of ascites and deranged coagulation that is not getting corrected on giving vitamin K, we can, and if the child is quite not doing well, we can directly go in for a liver transplant. However, if the child is holding on well, we can go in with a Kasai's photoenterostomy and prolong the progression, sir, in case.
Okay. The other thing that is a little unusual in this liver biopsy is at 3.5 months, child has only mild portal fibrosis. At 3.5 months, usually they are cirrhotic.
Yeah, sir. Intraoperative findings were that the liver was looking cirrhotic, sir. This was an intraoperative comment by our surgeon, sir.
Yeah, so that's something that is there.
So, and we also medically manage the, I would also like to medically manage the case in the form of providing adequate high calorie diet in the form of adding MCT oil in the diet and maintaining vitamin A, D, E, K supplementation at slightly higher, twice the number of, double the amount of the required daily allowance, and also to add some choleretic agents like ursodeoxycholic acid in this case.
Would transplant be an option at this stage?
Sir, since the child has presented this late and with so we would like to go for an photoenterostomy right now. But if the child was, say, having ascites, was having a coagulation profile not getting corrected on vitamin K, or had a low albumin count, so then that is the time we would have thought of going in for a liver transplant rather than going for an Kasai's procedures.
So what is the role of photoenterostomy in management of this biliary atresia?
So photoenterostomy will basically help, it will help establish bile flow by doing a Roux-en-Y jejunal loop anastomosis. You'll establish a bile flow. It progresses the condition, sir. So eventually at some point of time in the life, maybe in early adolescence or early adulthood, the child may require a liver transplant because of progressive cirrhosis that takes place. It will just progress the condition, sir. It's just to buy time, basically.
Yeah. So let me ask you a second question. When you get a diagnosis of a biliary atresia, it was time to talk to the parents.
Yes, sir.
What did you counsel them? One, counseling in terms of what the disease is, and
yes,
second, counseling about what you are planning to do.
So this is after we have got the confirmation of biliary atresia, right, sir?
After the biopsy.
After the biopsy. So I would like to explain it to the parents what the condition is. So basically, what are we dealing with here? Where the exact obstruction to the flow of bile is, and due to the obstruction of the flow of the bile, what are the changes that are taking place? And because of these changes, the liver is not able to function to its utmost best, and hence what we are, and the liver biopsy is also suggestive of the same. So what I would like to tell them is to counsel them what we are going to do now is we are basically going to do a procedure that will help elevate this obstruction. It will help establish bile flow, but it is unsure certainty that how long will this bile flow be established. It may give away maybe at 6 months of age, 1 year of age, at 10 years of age. So eventually in near future, the child may require a liver transplant.
So at 3.5 months, biliary atresia surgery is more likely to require it earlier? a liver transplant?
Yes, sir. I mean, possibly, sir, because he's presented quite late. So the chances of establishing good bile flow after a Kasai's procedure is when the child presents to you and when you operate on the child. The earlier you operate, the better, sir. The prognosis worsens with delaying time. So usually the golden period of say 60 days has been elapsed. So the possibility of establishing a bile flow becomes skimmer and skimmer.
Okay. Thanks.
What is the success rate at 8 weeks? If you operate before 8 weeks?
So if you operate before 8 weeks, the success is almost about 80 to 85% have a successful bile flow establishment, sir. So the success rates are 80 to 90% when it's done prior to 8 weeks. At 8 weeks and prior to that.
And after 8 weeks?
So it falls down to 60 and then 30%, sir. Or maybe even lower if after 60 days has elapsed. After 60 days have elapsed.
Bhavdekar sir, can you just throw some light on when a typical biliary atresia presents?
Yeah, so this is an older presentation. This is not common presentation in terms of the age. But my feeling is whenever we have seen these older people coming with problems, the general thing is they would generally have had jaundice much earlier. They would have had clay colored stools from around 2 weeks to 1 month of life, but it has been very mild and more often than not, it is missed. And it is only because this child developed that hematoma that the child came to us. But I have a feeling that this jaundice has been going on for much before, because biliary atresias cannot have jaundice presenting after 3 months of life, the classical biliary atresias. So either the biliary atresia diagnosis is wrong or the history is something that the parents give, but I think it has happened before. Yeah. So the classical presentation is the child is born normally. It's a well baby, as Siddhant has harped about it many times, which is absolutely right. They are usually fine till around 2 to 4 weeks of life. Between 2 and 3 weeks, they start developing clay-colored stools or non-pigmented stools or lightly pigmented stools with jaundice. In an occasional child, the jaundice can start very early, even in the first week of life, but that is very uncommon. And they will start usually at 2 weeks. The common thing is they goes to the pediatrician. Commonly, it's thought to have unconjugated jaundice, and the parents are usually said, okay, come back to me after a week or 2 weeks. So it's usually around 4 weeks of life that majority of the children come to us, because by the time the jaundice has not settled, a bilirubin is done and it is found to be conjugated. But even at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or even up to 8 weeks, the child is growing well. The child is mentally normal, motor milestones are normal, growth parameters are normal, because again, as I said, this is a biliary disease. This is not an intrahepatic primary disease that is there. So good growth, well-growing child, feeding well, and having jaundice is where you suspect a biliary atresia. And these are the manifestations of a vitamin K deficiency secondary to liver disease. This is not a true coagulopathy. If it was a true coagulopathy like tyrosinemia or galactosemia, it would not have settled with vitamin K. Your INR would be able to deranged continuously, and the child will be sicker than what the child is right now.
Siddhant, what are the possibilities you'll consider if a child comes with a conjugated jaundice at around 4 weeks, like sir has said? What are the other things you can consider?
So conjugated jaundice at around?
Around 4 weeks, the typical time when sir has mentioned the biliary atresias are detected.
Audible?
Are you there?
Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Sanjay, I don't get the question.
Hello. Yeah. Yes, I could not hear the question, sir. Sorry.
So what are the likely causes you would rule out or think about at around 4 weeks if a child presents with conjugated jaundice?
So one, as sir mentioned, at 4 weeks again, it could be a possibility of biliary atresia only, or but sir, conjugated. It's not unconjugated. So sir, again, possibly it could be any form of hepatitis that could also give rise to. Hello.
Yeah, continue, Siddhant.
Yes, so biliary atresia, neonatal hepatitis, that could give rise to jaundice at this during 4 weeks of time, and even storage disorders can also actually give rise to jaundice, direct hyperbilirubinemia in this age group. So you have to also rule out the possibility of hypothyroidism. And
Siddharth, can you enumerate a few storage disorders which will present like this?
So storage disorders like usually Gauchers can present with hepatosplenomegaly.
Do they present with jaundice, alcoholic stools?
Not less likely alcoholic stools. They won't present with alcoholic stools, but jaundice, yes, they could present with jaundice.
Gauchers generally present with organomegaly. They do not present with jaundice.
Yes.
Usually.
So then you can have, glycogen storage disorders.
So glycogen storage disorders never present with jaundice, never. And they present with primarily hepatomegaly, usually not at this age. So they don't have neonatal cholestasis. Any other story? So Niemann-Pick disease is present with neonatal cholestasis, not Gauchers, and they present with jaundice, and especially there is a Niemann-Pick called as Niemann-Pick type C.
Yes, sometimes.
Presence with neonatal cholestasis like this particular child. And one of the ways to clinically suspect is, unlike other liver diseases, Niemann-Pick C has a big spleen. So if you get a child at 3 months with a big spleen, a really big spleen, so the splenomegaly is the really presenting feature along with jaundice, think of the possibility that this could be
Niemann-Pick.
Right? But overall, very few storage diseases present with neonatal cholestasis. They usually present with organomegalies. They don't have jaundice.
Anyone has any comments? The faculty.
What is the paucity of bile duct syndrome called as? Intrahepatic paucity of bile ducts. You mentioned there's no evidence of paucity of bile ducts.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What is the intrahepatic paucity of bile ducts called as? What was the syndrome named as?
So you're talking about PFIX or?
No, intrahepatic. What is Alagille syndrome?
So yes, sir. So Alagille syndrome, again, we'll have the child will be dysmorphic. So there'll be a paucity of bile ducts in Alagille syndrome. Child will usually be syndromic and will present with dysmorphic features, eye abnormalities in the form of embryotoxon or microcornea, or optic disc drusen, or it can also present with CVS abnormalities in the form of pulmonic stenosis or VSDs. They can also have bony abnormalities in the form of fused vertebrae or butterfly-shaped vertebrae.
Yeah.
So just to remember, for Alagilles, the syndromic phases presents usually after the first year of life. It can present early also, but a classic presentation Alagille phases is later. So don't rule out a diagnosis, a differential diagnosis of Alagilles just because the phases is not there, right?
Okay.
Something you need to remember.
Any of the faculties have any other comments or questions?
So yeah, I just want to take it. I'm sure it's something which we need to. So you have done the surgery, you have done the portoenterostomy. Is your job over now?
No, sir. So once a portoenterostomy has been done, first the post-op complications also have to be monitored for, sir.
Is the child on after You discharge the child after a portoenterostomy. Did the child go home on any medications?
No, actually the child is still admitted with us. He's post-operative day 5 today. So he is still there, sir. So child is still with us. So he hasn't been discharged yet.
If you discharge him in the next 2 days, will you put him on any medications?
Yes, sir. So we will actually we will continue vitamin A, D, and K supplements for at least 3 months of age till the jaundice. 3 months after the jaundice comes down, sir. And yeah, so we will definitely continue the vitamins.
What is the definition of failed Kasai's or failed portoenterostomy?
So failed Kasai's or failed portoenterostomy is usually after 3 months of doing a Kasai's portoenterostomy. Even after 3 months, if the bilirubin levels are more than 6. So those are the biochemical evidence of a failed Kasai's, sir. And if the child, say, is having progressive cirrhosis and having hypoalbuminemia and is clinically worsening, so that could also be a sign of a failed Kasai's.
So 3 months after the portoenterostomy, you will be able to tell the parents whether this child is likely to come out or is going to require a
transplant.
Very soon, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Is there any role of steroids post-surgery?
No, sir. I don't think, the best of my knowledge, there is any role of steroids.
I don't think we'll go there. That's a little not for PGs. Is biliary atresia inherited? Will you counsel the parents? They will ask you, is my next child likely to develop biliary atresia?
Sir, it could be. So usually, sir, you have to rule out other syndromic associations with biliary atresia as well, sir. So some of those could be transmitted.
Syndrome is very rare. Biliary atresia is generally never inherited.
Yes, it's never inherited, but
for all practical purposes, you can tell the parents that it is almost unlikely that your second child will get biliary atresia. The risk is like anyone in the normal population. There is no excess risk. Okay, I think that's fine from my side.
Thank you, sir.
What are the most frequent causes of readmissions in such patients?
Ma'am, history of, again, recurring jaundice or maybe fever or massive ascites or child failing to gain weight and having massive ascites. So basically all those features of failed Kasai's, ma'am.
So, sorry, Madhu, let me interrupt for a minute.
Yeah. This is for you only, Ashish.
That's a good question you asked. So, Siddhant, besides vitamin A, D, E, K, is there anything else you would like to start? UDCA?
Yes, sir. So UDCA will cholinergic agents which will help establish bile flow usually. So we usually, I'm not sure if we continue it after surgery.
Yeah, you will continue almost everything till, depending on the age, quite often till 1 year of life. Anything else? This is pertaining to the question that Madhu asked. What is the commonest complication after biliary atresia?
So cholangitis.
Cholangitis, exactly. So to prevent cholangitis, will you start a child on anything at the time of discharge? Okay, so we start on prophylactic antibiotics.
Prophylactic.
Every child is started on prophylactic antibiotics. You give one antibiotic for 15 days and then next 15 days another antibiotic. So alternating that, and that will
tell us which antibiotic, please.
Various people use various antibiotics. There is no specific protocol.
Which one you use?
We use Oflox and cefotaxime here. Some people use Septran, and it's depending on what institute likes.
Is the dose 1/3 of normal dose?
Yes, it is. It's 1/3. It's prophylactic, and it's quite often continued till 1 year of life. It's a long continuation.
Now to this question to Siddhant, with which organisms in mind these antibiotics are given?
So ma'am, after usually handling in the abdomen, ma'am, gram-negative organisms, basically sepsis because of gram-negative organisms.
jump back again. What are the indications of liver transplant in a child with biliary atresia? One is, which are very close, failed Kasai's.
So one is failed Kasai's. The second one, if the age of presentation is quite late and the child is already presented with features suggestive of having a massive ascites with hypoalbuminemia, and the child is already sick. So that instead of going on for a Kasai's, you would directly go on for a liver transplantation, sir.
So a lot of centers do primary Kasai's after 4 months, they go in for a transplant. So that is a late presentation. What is the other indication of liver transplant in biliary atresia?
Sir, even after so recurrent cholangitis causing
correct.
So recurrent cholangitis will cause a lot of biliary scarring, and again there will be narrowing of the ductular flow, and again that will give rise to an obstruction in the biliary tree.
So recurrent cholangitis and a child who's had a successful Kasai's, but by 8 or 10 years, as you said, over a period of time, then the liver has decompensated, then you will require to do a liver transplant at that particular time. Yeah. All right.
Any other faculty would like to comment or?
Along with vitamin, fat soluble vitamin, I think water soluble vitamin should be given in double dose.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, water soluble vitamins and even micronutrients should also be continued. Yes.
Yeah.
Any special vaccination for such kids, or it's a usual IAP schedule or something? Or are there any vaccines that even if they must do kind of a thing? Sometimes this pneumococcal, sometimes the parents take, sometimes parents don't take. What would you advise to such a parent?
Biliary atresia, there is no specific indication of any special vaccines per se, because we are not afraid of any capsulated organism infection in this condition, ma'am. So we would obviously try to recommend the IAP schedule and give the proper schedule in the right doses.
What extra precaution would you take while vaccination in this child? Siddhant?
Yes, sir.
This child has obvious bleeds. So what extra precaution you would recommend?
So we have to make sure that the coagulation profile is not deranged, and if it's not deranged, then only you have to give IM injections, because
will you hold on the vaccines?
So what we can do is we can basically use a smaller gauge needle and give it.
And anything more?
Or we give the vaccine and compress it for almost 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah,
once given.
Smaller gauge needle and continued compression for another 5 to 10 minutes till the bleeding stops.
Yes.
And if some vaccines can be given subcutaneously instead of intramuscular, you would prefer to do that.
Yes.
Yes, that is also enough.
Would you like to give any vaccines earlier than what you would expect as compared to a normal child?
So I'm not sure about.
So not necessarily for a biliary atresia, but if you're planning and this is a failed Kasai's and you're thinking of a transplant, then vaccines which you otherwise would give after 1 year of life, especially varicella and all, you normally don't give it in the early life, you would give it much earlier.
Okay.
The first year of life, because you will not be able to give varicella after the liver transplant. You will not be able to give any live vaccines afterwards. You would ensure that the child has had it before.
Yes.
Siddhant?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of diet do you think? Any special dietary?
No, ma'am. If we have ruled out the possibility of a metabolic disorder, ma'am, no such special diet that has to be recommended, ma'am. You can continue the multivitamins and a normal diet that the child has.
Would you not want to give MCT?
Pardon, sir? Sir, yeah, we would like to add MCT and calorie-rich, calorie-dense diet, sir, rather.
Ashish, why MCT?
It will help absorb.
Ashish is there?
Yeah, Siddhant will tell us. He knows the answer.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So MCT is a medium chain triglyceride, sir. So they help in the micelle formation with cholesterol and help in absorption of the other vitamins and lipids also, sir. So hello. Hello.
And how much MCT do you add? How do you do it
Ma'am,
exactly?
usually we add around 1 to 2 ml per kg of MCT oil per feed.
1 to 2
Sorry,
ml.
1 to 2 ml per kg per day. Around 8. What we practice at our institute is around 8 drops per feed.
8 drops per feed.
Roughly, ma'am, the guidelines say around 1 to 2 ml per kg per day of MCT oil should be added, ma'am.
Should it form some percentage of the total fat that which contribute to the calories or anything? I'm asking this genuinely. I don't know answer to this question. I say pucha. I mean, anyone can answer. I don't know. Is there any science? Anyway, let's find out if you don't. Or let Ashish answer this. Anything? Okay, I think any other faculty wants to ask anything. Ashish, more questions?
No, Madhu, sorry, I have to log off. I have
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ashish.
Yeah, thank
On
you.
behalf of everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Nice presentation and a good discussion, Siddhant.
Thank you, sir.
Hotu madam, can we wind up? How?
I think we can. It's almost 4 o'clock.
Yeah. So excellent presentation, Siddhant.
Thank you, sir.
And a very good discussion, sir said. We had an attendance of about 90 this time around. So great attendance as well. So we'll keep on doing these cases regularly and have the super specialists also, so that we get good academic content in the cases as well. Thank you, Hotu madam, for arranging these cases regularly.
No, this is Pramod.
And
Pramod does it every time. I don't. Thank you so much.
Presented Siddhant. That was a very nice discussion indeed.
Very nice
Thank you, everybody.
discussion, Siddhant. Well done.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Siddhant's mentors, Dr. Vijay Kalra, who is not with us just now.
Yes, actually, he's been one of the main mentors. He and Mankar sir are the two people who keep guiding us in our PG teaching program.
And the Bharti team Bharti. A good case. I think we have learnt a lot. Over to Secretary and President.
So thank you all of the faculty, Bavdekar sir, Sumit Pitkar, Karambekar sir, Sanjay Joshi sir, but the others chipped in. So Hotu madam, Rajesh Kulkarni sir, Deepali Ambike madam, all of these people chipped in as well. Thank you to them as well. And I think we'll be meeting again after 15 days. So till then, see you around. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very well presented.
Thank you, everybody.
Siddhant. Yeah, thank you, everybody.